I'd just like to have our speakers take the stage. We have James Capo, Vice President of Digital Business Development with Access Intelligence. Joel Hughes, Senior Vice President of eMedia Information Technology with Scranton, Gillette. And Roberta Muller, Vice President of Product Development and Digital Production with North Star Travel Media. I'm excited about the panelists today. When I'm programming 80 or 83 different ABM events a year, you've really got to identify who the stars are within the media universe. And we've got three of them here. We've got people who can speak to both the business side of the equation and the digital media side of the equation, and their roles really reflect that. And to start, instead of me listing off your bios, I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves. You don't have to give us your full profile, but please talk a little bit about your current role and how that's really evolved at your companies. Roberta, let's start with you.
Sure. My name is Roberta Muller, Vice President, Product Development and Digital Production at North Star. Hi, I handle three different areas of the organization. The first is digital production, all things ad serving, along with email, e-newsletter creation and distribution. I also keep an eye on product development, which includes requirements gathering, project management, implementation, quality assurance testing, and rollout. And then I also oversee now our new audience development department, which we started last year, which had a P&L with nothing in it. And now we have 2 individuals and some expenses, which is great. So it's audience development now. So there's 3 areas. And I think the day-to-day functions of my job, the nuances haven't changed, but I have to say it's so much harder today than it was before. Everything's a lot more complex. There's a lot more integrations. We have a lot more software. We have a lot more tools that we use. The clients are more demanding. The salespeople need hand-holding. So I think just the day-to-day nuances have evolved in that it's more complex, and it just makes everything a little bit more challenging at the end of the day.
Thank you. Brett had introduced this panel by saying it's all about data, 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 and that kind of defines the path that you're taking, Joel. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. So, been with Scranton Gillette about 8 years. When I started, I was in charge of pretty much building the IT infrastructure up, rebuilding it, building internal teams to support both the infrastructure, and then all the web development too. We had it all out of house, so we had to build a web team. And so it got to be, up until a couple months ago, I would always say I'm in charge of everything that plugs in or takes power other than the appliances in the cafeteria, which I've also been asked about multiple times. The classic thing, when the power goes out, people come into my office, Joel, the power's out. Okay, I have nothing to do with that other than electricity makes your computer work, So with the introduction of our new sort of consensus audience, centralized audience database, with all the insights we're able to see from that, all the client requests, all the sales requests, and all the potential that data has, as well as any other data products we have, but whether it be pure data product plays or using data for efficiencies in all areas of the org, we decided to kind of basically engineer a data department. And so right now it's an army of 2. It's me and 1 employee. So I'm the senior VP data at Scranton Gillette right now. So pretty recent transition. And what's amazing is starting from nothing, inventing a completely new position that didn't exist before. I'm busier than ever. Even after shedding all of the web development team and all of the infrastructure stuff. So I don't know how that happened, but I guess it goes to show when you put a little focus on something like this, how quickly that can blow out basically. So it's great.
All right, thanks very much. And James, you're somebody who really straddles both sides here. When I first met you, you were the head of digital at a different company. Now you're head of business development at Access Intelligence. Just talk a little bit about how that's changed for you.
Yeah, sure. So James Capo, I've been at Access Intelligence for about 1.5 years. Previous to that, I was at Cygnus Business Media. I think the change that we've had recently, just in the last 6 months, we've created what we call internally as a sort of a digital services group. And that's my team, which includes our product development, sort of like as Roberta was saying, as well as our analytics group, and then as our Salesforce.com administrator as well. So I really straddle sort of the the business side, where I'm out with our publishers, I'm out with our salespeople, we're talking about our capabilities, we're talking about the products we have, what we can, what we can't do, and then coming back internally and trying to put it all in a big pot, stir it up, and see what we can make happen. So there's that somewhat sometimes a disconnect between the sales process on that side and then the tech side. And my team is really trying to bring those things together, both from not just the sales, but we're also a heavy marketing group as well with our analytics, with our events. So bring all of that into a centralized area that we can then respond to each of our market opportunities quickly, efficiently, with the goal of really looking at our business units as our clients. That's the one thing I'm really big about with my team, is saying, our business units are our clients. We have to respond to them. We have to respond quickly, and we have to respond efficiently.
Okay, very good. You guys all alluded to this, but the fact is that we're seeing more and more requests for that integrated package. That's what we've been chasing for years. Increasingly, you're starting to hear the term omni-channel replace integrated package. Can you give us some examples of what are some of these major projects that you're seeing that's caused a change for the way that you and your groups operate and the way that the business side operate? James, since you've got a dedicated group to try to really bridge that gap, let's go with you first.
Yeah, so we've launched, a sort of a suite of products over the last year that have been focused on. I think an omni-channel is a good way to say that. We really have positioned it in 3 areas: thought leadership, branding, and lead gen. We have to make it simple, both for our own internal processes to make sure we have our sales teams and our publishers and our business units understanding what we're going out to the market with. But then from the advertising side, we can't confuse them. And so we really tried to create a model where this is, if we have a thought leadership opportunity, here are the products and services we have that we can offer our clients. If we have a branding opportunity, here are the digital things we can do. If we have a lead gen opportunity, here's that. Really break it down into very simple chunks. And then when we start to talk to the clients, we start to understand what their needs are. We can then position the custom programs depending. Sometimes they overlap, which is great. But it's one product we have that is our content marketing platform called Decision Briefs. Is sort of that omni-channel approach where we have both print involved, we have digital involved, we have social involved, and we try to package it up so that the clients are getting a little value in each one of our channels.
Okay, very good. Who's the first point of contact? As we saw with Randall Riley, they've gone to a model where they really have one rep who then pushes it out through the organization. I mean, is your group making that contact? Is it somebody at the brand level with AI?
In terms of the advertising side?
In terms of the advertising side.
No, the relationship stays with the salespeople and with the publishers, as it should. Over time, I think, as the business units are utilizing our services, we obviously, and I particularly will go out with a lot of our sales teams and form relationships with the advertisers. But the relationship stays with the salesperson, stays with the market leader, because they know the market. That's very important. And I've never felt that my group or myself should come in and say, I know this market, I know what's going on. We don't. We're there to help serve, help understand what we need to do. Mm-hmm. But really that relationship, I think, should stay with the publisher, with the salesperson.
So walk me through that relationship. Does that salesperson then come to you? I mean, specifically, take me from point A, point B, point C.
Sure. So, Tom's sitting here. He's one of our publishers. So raise your hand, Tom. I'm calling you out. For example, I will go out with Tom. Tom will call me. He's a publisher for our defense and healthcare group, and he has a sales team underneath him. And if they have a conversation that they feel needs to, we need to sort of, I don't want to say show off, but we need to show our capabilities. We need to go in there, have a sort of suite of things that we can do. Tom will call me, someone on his sales team will call me and say, hey James, we've got this client, can we go out the door and pitch what we need to pitch? And what happens over time, it's the whole see one, do one, teach one type thing. So what I've noticed is once you sort of go out with the salespeople for a while, they start to learn it, they start to understand it. I get called less, which is great because they're more involved with the products now. And then it becomes larger conversations with key clients down the road.
Okay, very good. Joel, let's jump over to you. Can you share an example, a specific project that you're working on with the business team, and how's that different from maybe what you were producing a couple of years ago?
Sure. I'll get specific in a second, but in general, one major shift we're seeing with the whole omni-channel, cross-platform sales is we're selling kind of audience first. So let's find your audience, let's find your target, and then let's figure out the products that might match them. As far as specific examples, we'll get into this a little bit later in more detail, but there's so many custom solutions out there that are required. Engagements now are becoming custom, custom's becoming our differentiator these days. So, a specific example would be we're doing a building science video series, and it's shot on site for a client, so say LP Smart Side Siding. We'll go into the factory, look at how their materials are made, get in-depth, real sort of Discovery Channel quality video. And that's backed up with a multi-channel campaign to drive eyeballs to the videos and make sure they're seeing that. And then we're also using data on the back end to then measure everything, get the ROI down. And it's totally custom, so it's a custom area on the website, custom video players, all the videos custom, all the email deployments are targeted and custom. And then we can take all the feedback from that by just measuring everything with our database and go after with follow-up campaigns. So we basically figure out the brand advocates by who's engaged with that,
right,
and follow up with that. So that's good, total omni-channel, data-driven, audience first.
Okay, very good. Roberta, both Joel and James have talked about the demands for custom programs. Can you talk a little bit about how North Star is really handling that?
Custom is, I think, drains the business quite a bit, but it's essential to keep us ahead of the pack. Just about everything we do is custom, so what we try to do to make sure we are not just building things that people will come to is we evaluate all of the platforms and the features and the functionality that are being requested of us to make sure that those items make sense, 1 year down the road and 2 years down the road. We don't have an endless staff of development team, but we want to make sure that what we are building, we can support, we can scale, and we can grow. So most times what we do is have our director of sales, our digital director of sales, are kind of our front line to our sales team. So our sales teams, there's 2 directors of sales, one for the travel retail group, one for the meetings group, and they are that first point of contact. And they're very well educated on all of our digital platforms, and if they ever have any questions, then they come to either myself or they come to one of my product managers within our group to kind of help them brainstorm on new ideas, custom ideas that a client might be looking for. And then we just verbally walk through that, make sure it makes sense, make sure it's high level, something that we can do before they actually go back out in front of the clients and the salespeople, and then they make their pitch for whatever custom program that we're working on.
Okay, very good. I'd just like to ask the audience a question. How many of you folks are business side? Raise your hands. How many of you folks would classify yourselves as digital media side? Okay, so we've got a fairly even group here. I mean, one thing that we don't want this panel to be is picking on the business side. I think when we have these conversations, it's always about, well, the business side doesn't really understand digital, they don't want to understand digital, how do we get them up to speed on that? But it cuts both ways. Just because you're digital media doesn't mean you know a damn thing about business. I mean, it's fairly simple terms, yield per page. That's something that may be missing from the digital media side. They may not understand the sales cycle. They may not really understand the urgency or the importance of getting a project done. Can you guys talk about how you've really raised the business side acumen of your organizations for the digital media side and the technology side? Joel, I want to start with you because I know with Scranton Gillette, with your content folks, there's a certain amount of digital media prowess that they have to display in order to get hired. They have to know some basic HTML, some other things. For the publishing side, is there something similar as far as raising their business understanding and getting them to understand the business terms that you guys are dealing with?
Or the digital side?
On the digital side,
yes. So I'm huge on the digital side knowing business. So any programmers, SEO folks, anyone who's directly creating products, who's slinging code, hacking stuff, laying down code, dealing with data, they've got to know how the business works, how we make money. And the way we do that a couple ways. One is we get them out in the marketplace as much as we can. So we fly them out to shows, we have them on client calls. We don't have any like geeked out people who just sit in the back office. They have to. We go through the expense of having them walk the show floor with a rep, having them sit down with a rep and see how they work their sales calls, how they work an editorial calendar, how they deal with leads and follow-ups, and how they take notes and how they use a CRM system. And then we have them sit down with the ad coordinators and the digital traffic and print traffic folks. How is the material handled? How does it categorize, come in? So I like to both get them out into the market as much as possible in front of the marketplace, and then also sit with all the other groups, both the kind of service groups as well as the sales groups, so they really understand the business. And I have very little tolerance for them not getting the whole picture. So.
James, with the creation of your digital services group, is there a certain business understanding that they need to bring to this, and how do you get them up to speed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at Joel's point, spot on. I think getting people in the marketplace is key to that. In some ways, the development team does not report into me. That reports into our VP of development, but we work hand in hand very closely. But they do need to have an understanding of the business. It can be a thankless job in some cases, because a lot of times that team and that group, the only time they're getting talked to is when something's broken or something needs to be done very quickly. So they need to be pulled into the business side. They need to understand what's happening in the marketplace. Specifically for my team, it's critical. I tell my team we're revenue focused. That's our goal. Our head of analytics meets regularly with our CRO, Heather Farley, to discuss what is happening on the business side, making sure our projects are aligned with what the goals are over there. So we have, I think, at AI, very good alignment with our sort of high-level business unit operators as well within what we would call sort of our central services group. We try to react very quickly. We try not to get bogged down in any major projects that slow us down. But having that sort of access to the business units, having them trust us that we can complete a project, that it's not just going to fall to the wayside, is very important. And I stress that to my team repeatedly. We have to act quickly. We need to respond quickly. And they need to understand the business. They need to understand what the goals are of the business on a day-to-day basis.
Right. You talked about communicating with your team, and let's talk a little more specifically about that across the panels. Let's talk about terminology, what's really driving the conversation. I mean, Roberta, for the business side, are there specific terms, specific concepts that you think that they need to know? And does that cut both ways? Are there business side terms that your digital people really need to be familiar with?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's kind of like a family affair. I mean, I really think all members of the organization need to ensure that they're kind of cognizant of what goes on throughout the rest of the organization. I think that's important, because I think if you're going to move the business forward, everybody has some skin in the game. So for us, there's a role that we have at North Star that is really, it's like, to me, it's one of the most important roles in the organization, just next to the guy who does payroll. It's we call it a technical product specialist, and this is the individual who does most of our product management, but they're not developers, so they're not total geeks. So you can actually put them in front of clients and salespeople as well, but yet they understand the business, and they kind of spread both sides of the coin there. They make sure everybody's educated. So I use them quite a lot to help educate the business side on what their metrics look like, what's the basis of how ads are served and why we serve them, what is audience engagement, how does the opt-out link work in the newsletter, because they wonder why people don't get their newsletters, because they click the opt-out link. So I use these individuals to help explain to the business side key phrases, functionality, how applications work, And then on the flip side, I use them to also help educate the development team on how the business works. You know, why when we're building a XML exporter from InDesign into our website CMS, you know, why they need certain fields, why they don't want articles to come from print directly into the website and to be posted. Like, what's the business rules around that? So that the developers kind of have a sense of why they're building stuff. And so I think that role is really important to bridge the gap on terminology and functionality. And I think also some things that we do is we try to have like lunch and learns where we'll have a topic, like when we were doing responsive website design. Not everybody in the business knew what that meant, so we would have just very informal sessions just to bring the teams together to start the dialogue. So new things going on in digital media are kind of top of mind for everybody in the organization, and when you bring the business side in, they do start to learn each other's vocabulary, so to speak. And we do, we have an intranet, you know, you might use Salesforce Chatter, we use Jive, it's like a social intranet, so we post articles on what's going on in the industry, we post articles on hot new technology that's going on, just again, to keep people abreast of what's going on. So I think that's what we do at North Star, to help bridge the gap.
I know one of your colleagues, Tom Cintorino, at his previous company, he had developed a fairly intensive test for the digital media side, and this was administered throughout the year a couple different times. My question to the panel is, how do you keep pace with this? I mean, this isn't in terms of a conversation now. Things change so fast with the digital media side. When you start off in January, it's one thing. When it's June, it's something else. What's the true assessment of digital media knowledge throughout the year for both the business side and, frankly, for your digital media folks?
Well, we actually started trying to embrace the IAB digital media certification program that they have. But it's really hard because in B2B, some of our team members on the digital production side only see certain aspects. Like, we don't do billboard advertising, and there's just we don't do television advertising. So I took 2 individuals from digital production, and we had them trained, and they read articles, and they really tried really hard. And one passed. She happened to be the one that came from an ad agency. That made sense to me. And the other one didn't pass the test. I mean, but so be it. We'll keep trying. We also have daily Scrum meetings. Or actually, twice a week, we'll have a digital meeting, Scrum meeting. So it's just kind of stand up 15 minutes, and we just shoot off new topics, new trends, you know, what's going on in retarget, programmatic buying. We might talk about any viewability, you know, whatever new topics are coming up that we hear through the DMC, through the ABM Council, or we might hear at the IAB, anything we can think of just to keep people kind of educated on what's going on in the industry. Because you're right, it changes like lightning. It's tough to keep up.
Okay, very good. Guys, let's talk a little bit about establishing priorities across both the business side and the digital media side. Technology, it shouldn't be the tail that wags the dog. We know that, but I think sometimes, particularly in digital media, we all get enamored with bright, shiny objects. There's a lot of talk going on right now about programmatic. We've got a session later today about programmatic and marketing automation, and these are things that publishers absolutely need to keep their eye on. But for some, it hasn't really come to their marketplace yet. Maybe it's premature, maybe it's something that they need to be looking at in the near future. How does both the business side and the tech side, how do you really determine what you need to have versus what's nice to have? Is this simply what the advertising client wants, or is there something else to it?
So for us, it goes kind of both ways. Sometimes it's advertiser driven. So we'll get the request from a client or an agency and say, gosh, well, we didn't do that before, so we better figure out a way to do it. And sometimes we're driving it. Hey, that's great technology I saw somewhere. We got to invest in this, and then we've got to then bring everyone else along. And you know, the tech side, if you will, kind of wagging the dog or initiating. Hey, this is a great new technology I found. This is an opportunity we can use. There's money here for sure. It's starting to happen more and more, whether right or wrong. That just seems to be the origination point for a lot of new ideas and a lot of new ownership and drive are coming from the more tech side than your traditional publishing side of the business, in our case. So, going back to the whole point of this talk, the tech people really need to be involved with the business to then, rather than just throwing out that, because they really, making the go, no-go involves more than just short-term. It's how is this long-term? How does this age? How does this iterate? How does this scale? So tech does have to be involved, but they need to be good enough business leaders and be able to convince people that aren't into tech in the business that it's a great idea. So they have to have that business acumen and knowledge to really understand it inside and out to even toe the line on the idea. So almost all the efficiency, both efficiency side and new revenue opportunity side, we see coming driven from technology. So
we're seeing it from both sides. I think we're seeing, one example. We launched a product in March that we call Cascade. That is a long form sort of story format that started out of a strategic planning meeting for one of our brands, and there was some tech folks in the room, our editorial was in there, and sales was in there, and the question was asked from a sales group was, how do we get more traffic to our digital editions? And we sort of all said, well, maybe that's not the right question. How can we do something different that shows the content in a more relevant light for the medium in which it is? And that conversation spurred one of our editorial people to reach out to our head of development, which then turned into this great product that we're now selling across all of our marketplaces. So the idea generation can start really, I think, anywhere within the organization, but the key is to have, I think, the right people in the conversation who know the capabilities of the organization. When an idea just happens over here in a corner and then it sort of runs off and dies, it may not just because you didn't have the right people in the right room that can say, you know what, we can do that, or we could do this, or we could go here, and that's really something we try to push at AI, is the sort of collaboration of either through lunch and learns or through monthly marketing meetings or through whatever it might be, where we can get ideas out into the business units, but also have folks from our development group or my team there in place so that we can then say, you know what, we can do that, we can act on it, but it also adds, we can also bring value to the table with other projects we're working on.
I know oftentimes too we look at the return on investment as well. So we get a lot of ideas. It's interesting that on our team, I find the editorial people do actually come up with a lot of ideas. We get ideas from the digital sales directors. We get ideas from my own team, and we try to go through like a quick vetting process. Nothing really overly complicated, but there'll be either myself or a product manager, director of sales, and our director of corporate development, and we'll just kind of shoot through the idea real fast. I've got if it's got legs, I do a single sheet where it's just quick high-level summary of the product. What's the return on investment? Are we addressing usability? Are we addressing audience? Are we addressing engagement? What's the goals and the purpose of what it is that you need, that you want us to build? And then we kind of quickly try to estimate how much it's going to cost. We put that all on one sheet, and then if it really has some merit and we really think it's a long-term idea that we can go with, we start actually, like you were saying, broadening that circle to bring in a couple more business people, a couple more people from the digital team before we actually decide, yes, we're going to move forward with this. So we do a little bit of a vetting process.
And sometimes it just, sometimes there's advertiser money out there and you got to go get it. So that's part of it too, is they've got a budget of X amount, and the salesperson calls you and says, what can we do different? I need something. And you just sort of put your hat on, you go out there and you try to figure out what you can do to win that deal.
Okay, very good. Guys, you kicked off this conversation talking a little bit about some of the specific projects that you're getting requests for, a lot of custom work. Let's go a little deeper in that, and can you talk about where the tech investment is going to really support those types of projects? Joel, let's start with you on that.
Sure. For us, primarily it's talent. There's not enough web developers in the world to hire, basically. We would hire every one of them, I think. Like, it'd almost be interesting to see when we'd have to finally cap it off, but that's where our primary investment is. We're finding that we try to embrace the chaos, embrace custom, be able to pivot fast, be able to adapt quickly, and having a strong internal team. Although I think that bleeds into another question. Having a strong internal team is the key to all the strides we've made recently. We just have an awesome dev team. So the other investments are we're investing in technology to help our efficiencies, basically. So our new audience database, KM, cloud technologies, so we don't want to worry about our hosting. We've got specific Drupal hosting for our websites that takes care of a lot of efficiencies there. We've got Google Apps for Business running all of our inter-office communications. So we're investing in both talent and any efficiencies and toolkits we can. So new computers, 50 monitors, stand-up desk, whatever. That's fine. So hopefully that answers your question.
Very good. We've talked a little bit about the direct relationship between the digital media side and the salespeople, and primarily we've talked about media salespeople. How involved are you guys getting in events these days? These are really driving, for at least media side companies. Events are often the largest single revenue stream. I know yesterday with David Kisselstein, he's talked about how marketing services was their fastest growing revenue stream, but events is their biggest revenue streams. As publishers try to create more integrated, or here's that word again, omni-channel solutions, events are going to be a part of that. How are you guys on the tech side, the digital side, how are you getting more involved in events these days? James, let's start with you.
Yeah, no, the events are our largest revenue source as well. They're incredibly valuable for us. We sort of have a motto internally, more right people for our events, and we do that through data analysis and analytics. We've invested heavily in Tableau. For those of you who haven't used it, it's a great product. My director of analytics is been sort of the lead on that. We're analyzing attendance. We're analyzing where people are coming from, where we're seeing day parting on reg days. Events are huge for us, and we're definitely involved in the sort of the analysis of pre-show, post-show events. From an analytics standpoint. We are using Optimizely to do A/B testing for websites. So if you're going to reg, if you come to the site and you're trying to push an event, you're going to get a different experience versus someone who isn't coming. That you may want to see how that works on where you put the reg button. So we are heavily involved on the event side. Our goal is to bring someone in the top of the funnel and ultimately have them come to a face-to-face meeting and then monetize them along that funnel with advertising opportunities until they come to an event. So it's a huge driver for us and a big focus of my team.
Very good. Roberta, I know you guys are very heavily into events.
Yeah, I actually think that's an area we probably lag behind in, to be honest with you. Right now we're focusing on, again, finishing out the audience database and trying to bring in as much behavioral information as we can. For those of you who don't know, Joel is like the poster child for audience, so I have a little picture of you in my audience, all the things you've done, so check off my list.
Fabulous.
But I think bringing in more information on what topics our customers are engaging in, what the sections they're visiting, anything else that we can learn about our audience so that when it comes time to focus on trying to fill seats at events and find sponsorships, we can target better. I mean, that's really where we're focusing on next year, is where we can target. I find our events teams are siloed, which is not the best, I don't think. And I think from a development side, we could probably do a lot more from a digital side to help them kind of move forward. But I think that's definitely something we have to look at for 2015.
Got a couple things. So events was largely kind of an island, up until probably last year. So we've done two things. One is help target. So whatever their marketing is, let's make sure they're going to the right people. Whereas before it was pretty wild.
Spring.
Yeah, brutal. So we've helped quite a bit with that. And then the other thing is ensuring that after the event, it's actually three things. After the event, the data is being used correctly. So, and it's not on a spreadsheet somewhere on some GoToWebinar thing. We make sure we collect that data and get it into the database in the correct way to then be reused for a bunch of other stuff. Third thing, kind of a wild card, but it's a great way to get your tech side involved in the business, is we've actually done events with the tech staff doing the event. So maybe a webinar on how you should run email in your small business, how, storage in the cloud, why Drupal's great. We did, at an in-person event, we did a day stage with tech talks going the whole day. So we brought in some of our vendor partners in tech to talk a little bit about certain solutions, but literally taking technology that applies to any small business and educating your audience with that and monetizing your tech team that way. So we've done that as well. Just flip them inside out, and then they know the clients, they know the events, they know the industry because they're in it all of a sudden. So we've done a bit of that as well.
Well, Joel, you just said something interesting about how they can use the data the right way. And one thing that we haven't talked about really is analytics, who owns the analytics, and how do you get people to understand that? Can you guys talk a little bit about how you approach that in your organizations? With the keynote this morning from Randall Riley, they talked about how they're really measuring everything. How do you get on the same page with the digital sales folks or media sales folks on analytics about how things are performing, and how do you really work with them to improve things when improvement is needed? James, let's start with you on that.
Yeah, so we have an analytics group. It's an army of two, and director of analytics reports to me, and then someone underneath him. But we have sort of the two revenue streams. We have our media sales revenue streams, or advertisers, which need a certain level of metrics that they need to have, whether it's how well our campaigns did, impressions, or CPC, click-through rates, viewability is starting to come up a little bit. So what we did there is we actually created basically an eMedia report. So all of a client's analytics for a campaign are now available to its salespeople, so they can log into Salesforce, click a button, and have a nicely formatted report that has all the analytics for that campaign. Very high level, because really advertisers in some cases don't need that sort of conversion funnel data unless they're really on the lead gen side. What's nice about AI is we also have our what I would call sort of our marketing environment, where we are converting people to either our events or to a subscription newsletter that we have in a few of our markets. So that sort of conversion funnel is important, because we want to see where is that person coming in, what's their entry point, what email did they click on, what's their then conversion rate down to actually converting onto an event, a registration, or a paid webinar, or a newsletter. So we have those end user payments, and as well as we have the media side. So my group my team works very closely sort of analyzing that on both sides of the table, works with the operating groups. We also, in our finance team as well, is getting involved in this heavily on the analytics side, looking at some of how the funnels work and the reporting needs to happen. So we sit hand in hand with the operating units and hope to provide them with the data they need. Again, our director of analytics meets regularly with Heather, our COO, to sort of make sure our project and our analytics programs and what we're working on is in line with what the business units want. Sometimes we can get too in the weeds, and we just need to pull back. And so that's a good check on our project scope.
Okay, very good. Joel, Roberta, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so who owns them? Kind of everybody, and it depends. So, for example, for our SEO folks, they'll meet with each editorial team for each vertical group at least once a month, going over the analytics, Google Analytics stats. So that's that type of stat, internal use of statistics internally. Tell them what articles worked, what didn't, what's trending, how are they going versus their goal, keywords they want to rank for. So they might own that piece. From the sales side, we're trying to, in the data group, encourage sales reps to come to us before those client calls and let us load them up with data. And that will be trying to figure out brand advocates for that brand, people that are in that market, people engaging in content that's important to that brand, whether it be advertiser content or pure editorial. Looking at the events data, so we put on the mining hat, the light and do the splunking hardcore for them. And it's something that's building momentum, and it depends what rep, how progressive the rep is to come to us. But we try to make those custom statistic engagements that they can prepare them for a sales call.
That's key. I mean, the data out for the salespeople. I mean, that's key. It's the data doesn't lie, and they don't have to hide behind.
Exactly.
If you get them involved with it, you can get it out with the advertisers, and that's, I think, a huge thing is getting the salespeople the right data. I think that's big.
Okay.
And then also for the ROI question.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So.
Good. We've got a couple minutes left. I'd like to open up the audience. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Hi, Matt. I'm Crowley from Access Intelligence. Really more of a statement than a question, but I would say in the relevance of this panel, of the 4 group publishers that we have that are running different business units, the one that has actively sought out James and taken him, for publishers and salespeople that have taken him along on client appointments, her business is the one that's up.
Yep.
And, you look around the company, it doesn't take long for others to go, she's doing so much better than everybody else. And it is that embracing. And it's hard. Some people, they don't want the digital people to go along. They don't want to change their way. But if you can, in the organization, get that stickiness and get it working someplace, others do come along. And you see, if you get that partnership, it really does transform the business.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, my answer for the test. The test is not like a written test. The test is how is a sales rep performing in today's marketplace, and they're not going to be performing well for long if they don't blend their
Not
action.
reaching out and utilizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in our organization, we've seen that the digital sales director that use me and my team the most are the ones that we are getting the customizations for their clients, where we're having those one-off hallway conversations where a client's got some revenue, we want to figure out how are we going to get that revenue in, what do we need to do. They're the most successful there. And then I do see on the editorial side, we've got one brand where the person in charge of editorial is really glued to the digital sales director. They work very, very well together. They have a really long history, and they use each other quite a lot. And their website is by far the furthest along with features and functionality. And so, I think it's whoever reaches out and utilizes the team put in front of them the best.
Okay, excellent. Guys, we're about out of time, but I'd like you to leave us with a couple suggestions specifically on tools that the tech folks and the business side folks might want to keep an eye on. James, you gave an example earlier. You can certainly repeat that, but give us another one as well. What should be on people's radar?
Excuse me. Tableau has been great for us. I highly recommend folks check that out. It's in a sense, Excel on steroids, but it's a great visualization tool. It's a great way to pull data in from multiple locations and create some really nice reporting. Optimizely is a great A/B testing tool. We use Crazy Egg for heat mapping on the site. That's pretty neat. A lot of different tools. True Social Metrics is another tool that we use to pull in social data. From not only your brand, but from, we use it for our advertisers as well. We create a social media report every month based off the data we pull from that. What else? I mean, I could go on. A lot of different things. But I do think what David Kieselstein was saying yesterday about leasing versus building is key. There's so much out there. So many tools out there that are, frankly, affordable. $500 a month, that type of thing. They're on SaaS models that are you can get and use, and they're going after the big, the CPGs of the world and the J&Js to make their millions. And so for our type of level of organizations, we can get in there pretty quickly and cheaply.
Okay. Guys, anything else you'd suggest?
There's a lot of tools.
Yeah, so
I'd roll in for anything that doesn't have a tool. Google Docs is awesome. So we use that for sharing collaboration, particularly with metrics, keeping the sales force abreast of how things are doing. They just know to go to this certain folder, and there's stuff in there, their media kits are in there, all that stuff's centralized. So that's a great kind of broad stroke tool. We're a knowledge marketing client, so little pitch to Knowledge Marketing. Their database is an amazing tool. So we're really seeing a lot of insights from that. What else? We're a Drupal shop. So if you're thinking of switching to open source web development, think Drupal. We had our digital sales. One of our digital sales guys went to DrupalCon with us last year. It was awesome, you know. It's a great conference, and there's a lot of insight there that's not just code specific. So, you know, as much cross-pollination as you can do.
Good.
And we're
Berta,
looking
take us
at,
home.
We're looking at two new. We're looking at Polar for native advertising. There's a couple members of the ABM B2B companies that are using Polar. And we're also looking at Ion, which is an off-the-shelf application that does a lot of landing page lead generation. That's it's simple enough for the business team to use. So those are two more that we're looking at.
Okay, very good.
Right.
Guys, thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause, please.